And you are now live.
This is Senate Appropriations Committee, and our first topic of discussion is to review with the committee the pending changes in H315. This bill is over the House at this point, and our goal is to have amendments made in the House concurrence with further amendments, but the amendments are in fact what we have already agreed upon, so we can simply concur once the bill comes. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to have the committee get briefed on where those changes are occurring. To a large extent, they're gonna be very familiar. In some cases, it might be just changing a funding source, adding some clarifying language. With the brownfields, we moved the money, but we did on an expeditious way, but we didn't include the requested positions to actually do the work. So those are the kinds of things that are there. Plus, there were 3 areas that our policy committees have been working on that hopefully have been resolved. The first, as we knew, was the link-up language on the state tax treatment of income, PPP income, and UI. And so that hopefully will be ironed out. And then we had the differences, which we had talked about relative to the business grants. And I'm waiting confirmation from Senator Sirotkin that we have the final version of what has been agreed upon with the 2 Commerce and Economic Development Committees. And then the third area, which related to education, and we've worked that out. Representative Hooper and Representative Webb and Senator Campion and myself had a discussion about how we would to reach agreement on that as well. So I think our goal is that the House Appropriations will come back at 2 this afternoon and would move the bill out, assuming that we've got confirmation and agreement on all areas. So with that said, I'm going to let Stephanie just go through with the committee where the changes have occurred, and we'll do that as quickly as we can.
Okay. So Senator Kitchell just touched on most of the areas. There's a few technical changes. I'm going to focus on where money was changing mostly. So in the natural resources, there was $5 million that was going to VOREC that was out of ARPA funds. That's been changed back to general fund. So the same amount of dollars, same purpose, but changed to general fund. 2 places where money was taken out of the bill is that the place where we were reserving $20 million for pension is now struck from H315. The House has their $150 million reserve in the big bill, so that's why it's being taken out of this bill. The other place where a section was struck was the technical assistance on education that we had in 2.8 of ARPA money. That section is no longer in the bill.
Stephanie,
yeah.
Can you elaborate? What do you mean by technical assistance?
So we had 2.8 of ESSER money appropriated to the Agency of Education to a contract, and we allowed them to do a sole source contract if they chose with UVM to provide technical assistance to school districts in helping them deploy the ESSER monies that was coming to the school districts. There was a lot of resistance on the part of the agency to that approach. And so the decision was to take it out of this bill and continue to work on that issue of how we provide technical assistance in other vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
And then
I just to state it's a topic of further discussion. We just took it out of this bill because there was not agreement on how to proceed. And at this point, the Agency of Education was not enthusiastic. In fact, opposed it. And so the concern is how to do it in such a way that that it's endorsed and its full benefit can be achieved. So we're working on that for that reason.
I'm just curious why did they oppose it, Jane?
It's their normal way.
Well, yeah, I mean, what was their ostensible?
They felt that they didn't need that.
That they could appropriate.
They could do it themselves.
Okay.
We continue to believe that, just like we did with Efficiency Vermont, the schools can really benefit from having that external resource available. So the other option we're exploring is how to make it available freestanding, separate and apart, that could be accessed by the schools if they felt that they could benefit from that resource. So it's work still underway, just to be clear.
Okay, so we might move to a model, something like we've done with the RDCs.
Something like that, yes.
Okay, good.
So we'll keep going.
So the other area where the money was changing that Senator Kitchell touched on, but in the section 16, which is the education section, what remains in that section are the after school and summer programming for ESSER money, with half of that money having to be granted with the consultation and approval of the DCF Child Development Division. And then the summer meals appropriation stays, but the literacy appropriation is coming out of this bill. The House Committee on Education is working to put out the literacy bill that it got from the Senate fairly quickly next week. And so the money will migrate back into that bill. And then the student mental health and truancy pieces will also be addressed in other vehicles. So they're not in this bill any longer.
Some of what we were trying to do is synchronize bills that were in play, plus work that can be funded directly, because the schools have received a great deal of money as well to support truancy and mental health initiatives in their region. So that was really not that it wouldn't be done. It's just that there's different avenues to accomplish it.
The only other place where money is changing is we brought in an amendment to the corrections services budget to flip out $7 million of general fund for CRF funds to free up the money to pay for that VOREC change back to general fund. So that's it for the money changes in the bill. That the House essentially agreed on all the human service pieces that were in from the Senate, and most of the Senate language, very, very minor technical changes to language in the human service pieces. They agreed on all the higher ed pieces. They agreed essentially with the broadband pieces. There was a small change in one section about the 1.6 money for the CUDs. Who the applicants could be is included now in that. They agreed on all the smaller pieces in the back, the audits of the use of state paid deputies, the piece for the St. Joseph's Orphanage restorative inquiry. They agreed on the healthcare waiver and the other technical amendments that you had included. So the main areas where there was change in language was in section 3, that negotiation between the Commerce Committee and the Economic Development Committee, and we're confirming that it will be the final version that's in when the House is done, and then the link up language. That also needs to be confirmed that it's the final position.
Could you explain that link up language a little more clear?
I am not the best one to explain that. It's been under discussion a lot today in Ways and Means. When we had, it's what I understand is that the PPP loans or grants, if they become grants and loans, are exempt for the 20 tax year,
Yeah,
but it's leaving open the question of whether they're exempt for the 21 tax year.
yeah, well, that's fine because, yeah, I can understand why 20 should be exempt, but 21, it's giving them plenty of time to look
Yeah.
into it.
And I think technically, I think the language that we're going to see from Ways and Means puts the default in so that people should default. If you don't make a change, then they should know that it's taxable under the state. I think that's where they're landing. And I do think there's objections from the tax department. They would rather have the default be, you would have to take a further action to make it taxable.
Well, let me interject.
Yeah.
I'm just got off the phone with Senator Cummings, and they're still working on language, and hopefully the House will agree. Whatever it is, I realize the administration, I think that's about what you were saying, would like to have both 20 and 21 dealt with in the fast track bill. Our tax committees are saying they really want to do 21 separately.
yeah,
And that there's a miscellaneous tax bill that has to be acted on. It's over here, and they want to have an opportunity to take testimony and make a decision relative to that. So the administration would, of course, like to have it all done now. The tax committees are feeling that they want to have an opportunity to take the testimony and to make a specific decision around treatment for 21.
yeah, that's good. They should.
So that maybe we can work out a compromise. So it's very clear that the fast track bill is only addressing tax year 20, and that 21, even though it's not addressed here, it has to be decided on, and it will be decided on within a short period of time. So that seems to be the difference. Obviously, the administration is putting pressure because they would like to have it both years dealt with all at once. The general feeling, or at least what I am understanding, and if I haven't got it right, Becca, please correct me, is that they really don't feel comfortable rushing through 21 without more testimony and making a decision that is related to the second year of tax treatment.
Well, heck, 21 isn't until next year anyway.
Well, of course, tax preparers are anxious because you're advising people on tax treatment and obviously the quarterly payments and so forth. So they have a desire to get some certainty, but I would say the most compelling or the most time sensitive is we're hearing is around the treatment of that UI income. Yep. And getting clarity and a decision made on that, because that involves taxes that are being filed right now.
Yeah.
So that's the distinction, is doing it in two steps, doing the getting clarity for fiscal year tax year 20, and then the tax committees will make their decision and recommendations for a vote on 21.
That's fine.
So Senator Cummings was going to call Representative Ansell and see if they could come to some agreement on 315. I think that is the only area still under active discussion. Okay, Stephanie, how are we doing?
I think that covers it. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So that, I don't know, is this Ann again?
It's Mr. Sandman.
I know.
Won't you let me?
Hello?
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
Oh, Lord. Talk about transparency over YouTube, though. The entire negotiations is public.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought that was Senator Cummings again, but it was a reporter. So
We may have saved you then.
I don't know.
Do you have a
Yes.
different ringtone for each paper, Jane?
I wish. I wish.
It's a ding dong for a certain paper.
Yeah, you're right. So, committee, does that, are you comfortable with what we've worked out to get this bill completed? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay.
So the UI is not, it's either in or out. I mean, it's all being negotiated, but it's either going to be in that we do it or out that we don't. Is that what it is? Or are there some in-betweens?
No, I believe for this particular tax year for 20,
Yeah.
not this year, but for the year past,
Yeah.
that income exclusion will be,
Exclude.
Wow.
that income will be excluded.
Okay.
So,
From
but that's,
taxation.
but that is the
Yeah.
time-sensitive decision that
Right.
people need. And you've been getting calls from people saying, what is, what's going to happen with that?
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So hopefully we'll know within a few minutes. Anything else on that? So that's our goal, is to have it come over, and we've all are common understanding, and the policy committees have had a chance to work things out, and that it would be just a simple matter of we concur. But obviously it represents quite a bit of discussion and updated information, as is the case with any bill. Okay, then our agenda for today is, are we ahead already, Chrissy?
You are ready to go. We have Barb Neal in the waiting room.
Okay,
So if you're ready, I'll let her in and we can
all
take.
right, so we're moving on to 911.
That is correct.
Okay. Bobby, that's your section of the budget?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I know it is, because you and I talked with her about the
Oh,
deficit in the
that's
fund.
right. Yeah, we've already plowed some of that ground.
Was his hesitation making you nervous, Jane?
Yeah, I was like, have you forgotten?
Had I known.
Huh. Okay. Oh, there's Barbara down in the corner. Are you have anyone else with you, Barbara? Are you that you want to introduce? Otherwise, I'm going to let you do your presentation. We were just talking, Senator Starr and I, about our earlier meeting that we had with you around the fund, and the fact that that there is a deficit. Last year you were able to cover it with, unfortunately, you had to use money that you were hoping you could keep in reserve to deal and support technical upgrades, but you had to use it to pay your bills. I believe the House has provided, at least for the short term, capacity so that you can pay your bills this year, but it's still an outstanding issue around ongoing funding for the E911 system. So is that a correct kind of summary of where things stand?
Yes, I would say it is. In fact, that was pretty much what I was going to recap in my testimony today. I wondered if a quick overview of the 911 program would be helpful for the new members, or if you want.
I don't know. Well, we have Senator Booth and Senator Ballard. Do you need an update on 911? I think the main thing is, it's as Barbara has told us, is we have it's funded by the Universal Service Fund, and there are 4 identified uses from that fund, from those revenues. And unfortunately, E911 is number 4 on a list of 4. So with the revenues coming in at the level they have, is that there have not been adequate revenues using that funding to underwrite the costs of our emergency call system. And we did add a couple of years ago additional, what was it, 0.2 or 0.02? I'm just doing this off the top of my head, so please correct me. But that was specifically earmarked for broadband connectivity needs. So that's the first dollar off, and then there's of course telephone lifeline, and I can't remember the third off the top of my head. So that's our dilemma, and I know that what we have out here, at some point we've really got to deal with how we fund this system, because right now it's just underfunded, and it's using kind of one-time patches to keep us going. So I'm going to let you take it from there, Barbara. I just wanted to let the committee know that you had been in touch and that Senator Starr and I had met with you, and hopefully we have fully and accurately understood the situation that you're encountering right now.
Right. Well, thank you very much. And for the record, I am Barbara Neal, Executive Director of the Enhanced 911 Board. And I think you summarized it all very well. When you were referring to the amount that was added on to the Vermont Universal Service Fund charge a couple of years ago, I think 2019, it was 0.4%.
A 0.4, wow.
Yeah, it went from 2% to 2.4%, but that 0.4%, as you said, was dedicated to the connectivity fund. And the other service that is funded by the Vermont Universal Service Fund that I don't think you mentioned is the telecommunications relay service for the deaf.
Yes, that was the third. I knew there were four, but I couldn't remember all of them off the top of my head.
Right, and so we are we are fourth on that list, so that may be part of the issue, although those other programs need to be funded obviously as well. So a little bit maybe on how we got here. The revenue shortfalls in the Vermont Universal Service Fund have been ongoing for a while, and they really started to impact us in FY20 when we did not receive about $672,000 of our expected $4.9 million appropriation. As Senator Kitchell mentioned, we were able to kind of manage cash flow through FY20 because we had funds set aside for our system implementation of the digital system that actually did in fact go in October of 2020. And so the bills that were due for that implementation are due, well, have been paid since, but we were able to kind of navigate through that because we had a bit of a delay in the implementation of the system because of COVID and other reasons. But then in FY21, right now, we're about $600,000 behind where we would expect to be with the disbursements from the Universal Service Fund. And we're projecting another $768,000 at least in FY22 if things continue to go as they have been in the Vermont Universal Service Fund. So we certainly appreciate the recommendation that is in front of you, I believe, from House Appropriations for this additional $1.8 million to go to the Enhanced 911 Special Fund. That will certainly help address these shortfalls that exist now and are expected to continue while a long-term solution is identified. And I'm sure you all know that part of the recommendation from House Appropriations was that the Agency of Administration review our funding mechanism and come back in January, I think it is next year, to the appropriate committees with recommendations on where we go from here in funding the 911 system. So as I said, we certainly appreciate that recommendation and hope that you will support it as well. And we look forward to working with the administration and the legislature to identify a dedicated, reliable, and sustainable funding mechanism for the 911 program as we move forward. So did you want to look at the FY22 budget request itself, or where did you want me to go from here, Senator?
Well, if you've got, we don't need to get into just the ups and downs and so forth. Really, if you have one sheet that highlights the budget, that would be fine. If you want to share it, or I'll leave that up to you. We know that there's certain charges that we see, and we're very familiar with them. I think the main thing was for people to understand that we've got a fiscal issue here, that we're buying time. And I assume, that assuming that this committee agrees that we've got to provide the funding like that and concur with the House to allow this this discussion to move forward. It seems like the main thing is, if you want to talk about the number of staff and sort of you talked about your budget, I think that's really at the level the committee would be particularly interested. Senator Starr can look at the budget in greater detail, but I think it's fairly straightforward. You move money out to PSAPs, and so if you could perhaps just give a update on that, that I think would be a good start.
Okay. All right. So if you're looking at the budget presentation that was sent over earlier, the traditional budget request form, on page 4, you see the overview. I think that you're looking for, which includes, let me get it in front of my eyes as well. That would be helpful.
Can you do that, Chrissy? Thank you.
Oh, good. Very good. That helps rather than having me try to bring it up on the screen. So we did do our FY22 budget is for about $4.46 million, which is a decrease of about 7% from our FY21 budget. Some of this, though, has been addressed or will be addressed, or let me back up. We decreased our budget request by 7% because the instruction we had through the budget development process was that we are special funded and we need to live within our, the special fund revenue expectations. So we removed from our budget request a $300,000 capital reserve line item, or a set aside line item that we have used every year to build a reserve for when we need to do system replacements or system upgrades. It was really about the only place that we could see to cut from the budget, knowing that the Vermont Universal Service Fund wasn't going to be able to support our original $4.8-ish million request. So with much hesitation, we removed that from the FY22 budget request, which is why you see us sitting at 4.46. We also had carried a vacancy in our training and communications department because of the uncertainty in the budget process. My feeling is that with the recommendation from the House of this $1.8 million, we should be able to support filling that training vacancy, which is critical to call taker training, public education and outreach, and quality control work at the 911 board, and restore that $300,000 set aside so it can build for the years coming up. We've just entered into the contract within digital. That's a 5-year contract. But if we can build that reserve fund over the next 5 years, we'll be positioned much, much better for upgrades to the system to keep it operating, efficiently, that are certain to come. So we think that the House recommendation will help solve some of what you see here on this page. I mentioned the training vacancy. So we have a 10-member staff, myself and 9 other staff members, whose responsibilities fall into three broad categories: IT management of the system and the system provider, GIS, which is mapping, GIS and database management is about 40% of the staff, and then a training and communications team, which is typically 2 people, and as I just explained, reduced to 1 at the moment, who trains, certifies, recertifies, provides continuing education, quality control, and so on for the call takers. We do partner with 5 law enforcement agencies in Vermont for 911 call handling services. So those 5 agencies are the Department of Public Safety that operates 2 of our public safety answering points in Williston and Westminster. Also the Lamoille County Sheriff's Department and the St. Albans, Shelburne, and Hartford Police Departments all have 911 call taking positions in their facilities. There is a formal memorandum of understanding with those agencies that outlines our responsibilities, which are training and equipment and a connection to, obviously, to the 911 system, and the PSAP's responsibilities for answering calls from their primary catchment area and also providing backup services to the other 5 PSAPs. And it also outlines the reimbursement that we provide to those PSAPs for the call handling services. In total, that PSAP reimbursement is just over $1 million. It's $1,080,000 that is distributed to those PSAPs based on the number of 911 positions they house and the call volume that they answer. And that 1 million plus has been a steady number now for as many years as I've been director, and then a few years before that as well. So that is where we spend our money.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Questions that we have, Barbara? I just, the other thing, which while we have you here, you and I had an email exchange relative to the report that you filed.
Yes.
And if you just want to brief the committee on that, because I know the reason for requesting that report was as a result of service interruption, and it might be good to just bring the committee up to date on what that report said. I'm assuming that not everybody's had a chance to read it. But if you would be willing to do that in a summary, that would be great.
Sure. So the report that's being referred to is the Redundancy and Resiliency in Vermont's 911 System report. We call it the R&R report, which definitely doesn't stand for rest and relaxation in this case. But what it provided, back in 2018, the legislature required a report on redundancy and resiliency in the 911 system because there had been, as Senator Kitchell mentioned, some telephone service outages and isolation events that had happened that were of primary concern at that point. So we provided the report back in 2018. Then we provided an update to that report in 2019. And this most recent report, which was just a week or so ago, reflects the changes in the system configuration because of the implementation of the digital 911 system. So when you have a chance to review the report, you will see that we talk about all of the different networks or systems that are involved in the delivery of a 911 call. And we have identified vulnerabilities where we have visibility in those various networks. So to begin with, we talk about the originating service provider networks or systems. These are the telephone companies, wireline, wireless, and VoIP. We talk about how the calls get to us, what some of the vulnerabilities are in those networks that we can see. It's important to keep in mind that we don't have control over those networks, and we have limited visibility into how those networks operate. So we've identified some vulnerabilities there, and then we give an explanation of what happens when the 911 call actually enters the 911 system, the contracted 911 system. When the report went out, Senator Kitchell came back and made a really good observation that we didn't include any information in there about the number of outages that have occurred over, whatever reporting period we were talking about, in this case, 2019 and 2020. So I went back and we created a supplement to the report that summarizes and then further provides some details on all of the outages that we were aware of that impacted the ability of Vermonters to reach 911. So if you look at that supplemental report, you will see that there were no 911 system outages in 2019 or 2020. So that means the fully hosted contracted 911 system itself was operational 100% of the time, no outages within that system. And I also provide a summary of the telephone service provider outage reports that we received in the same time frame. So this is when any telephone service provider has an outage that impacts the ability of their customer to reach 911. So the 911 system is still operating over here. That particular company has had some problem in its network that prevents their callers from getting through really to anyone, but to include 911. And I don't have the report right in front of me, but there were about 25, I think it was 25 to 28 such telephone service provider outages reported to us in 2019 and the same number in 2020. And I go through and break down what the primary causes were. Often it's a fiber cut. Sometimes we know the fiber cut is because a tree fell or there was a motor vehicle accident. Other times it's just simply reported as a fiber cut. A few of them, a very few, were actually planned events, and others were equipment failures of one type or another. So I provided that information for your review, and we will incorporate that anytime we update that R&R report moving forward. So so that's at a high level what's in that report.
I did have one question. Obviously, if my telephone company, say whatever it is, Comcast, or Consolidated, if their service is down, then I can't access 911. Do we have any sense? Do they have does that get reported to you? How would you know that the problem isn't with the 911 system? It's the problem is the person who's trying to access the 911 system has a phone service that's down.
Right. So that's a really good question, and something that I should have brought up when I was just speaking. But to address the question about whether or not it's the 911 system or not, we know if it's the 911 system because of the monitoring and monitoring and maintenance that is done by the Digital to support that system. So we would be able to tell if it was a problem within our system fairly quickly. As to reporting of outages, very recently, in January, actually, the 911 board adopted a new rule on outage reporting requirements for telephone originating service providers and electric power companies. And so previous to that rule, only wireline companies operating in Vermont were required to report outages to the 911 board at a fairly granular level. They would let us know whenever 25 or more of their customers were unable to reach 911 because of a disruption or an issue within their network. Wireless and VoIP companies did not have Vermont-specific reporting requirements prior to February of this year. So they had to report to us in accordance with FCC thresholds for outage reporting. which are very high thresholds. It takes a lot in our view to hit the threshold that the FCC requires for reporting. So there were a lot of smaller outages, well, maybe not a lot, but there could potentially be smaller outages that impact fewer people that we wouldn't know about here in Vermont because it didn't reach that threshold. So the outage reporting rule that just went into effect is to address that. So now we require reporting from wireless companies whenever 50% of their coverage capacity in a given zip code is gone, is depleted for whatever reason, or for a reason within their network. So that's a much more granular than the FCC requires. And in a similar fashion, the VoIP requirement is when a certain number of subscribers are impacted within a given zip code, which roughly equates to a town here in Vermont. So those requirements have gone into effect as of February, and the companies have 6 months to get their reporting mechanisms in order so that they can send that information to us. So really, we should begin to see the reports, late July, early August, as those outages start to happen. That's going to give us a much clearer picture of how Vermonters are being impacted by these various types of service provider outages, we hope. So.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate the summary of the report. Now you won't have to read it, committee.
It's a very exciting report. I'm surprised you're not all rushing out to it. So.
Yeah. Well, Barbara, this committee, our committee assistant tracked them, and we have over 150 reports that we're the beneficiary of. So it really is an incredible amount of information to keep track of. So
I imagine
it should be part of the reports on reports.
we should have a checklist or verification.
Right, actually, Senator White, I believe, had a report on reports that her committee did.
Yeah.
Some of them nobody ever reads, and we forget why we asked for them. Actually, I wanted to point out that when your power goes out, your phone doesn't always go out. The problem is many of us have phones that require electricity to keep them operable. So we have an old dial phone, which is impossible to use to call anyone. It's very difficult if anybody remembers those old-fashioned dial-up. But we still have one, and we plug it in whenever the electricity goes out. It's amazing that the phones still work, so you could call 911.
Yeah, they have a whole battery backup system. I guess we call it a redundant system there. So you're right. But you have to haul those calls, those out of the closet usually. I still have one old rotary at times.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Rotary phone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what you mean?
I called it dial-up. It's rotary. Which is hard to do your, a 9-digit, but at least you can get.
Yeah, well, at least you're not back to 5-1 ring 2.
That's true.
Yeah.
Someday I'll tell you about being in Canada and using a party phone payphone.
That could be interesting. Thank you, Barbara, for coming.
Yeah.
We know that there's still work to do. So we'll do our best. And I feel comfortable saying that we recognize the need to address the short term immediately and put us on a path long term to get this resolved. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And certainly let me know if you need anything.
Yeah.
More
Okay.
information.
Great.
And if I run into a snag, Barbara, I'll give you a call.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So our next budget is the Lieutenant Governor's office, which should be fairly straightforward. I just am not sure. I have to say, I am not sure where things stand on our link up language. I can't keep track with what's moving back and forth, but hopefully we've got something close to resolution. And one question, Chrissy, have you heard back from Senator Sorokin that language is okay?
I have not.
Perhaps you could, I don't know whether Faith could help us on that or not.
Give a friendly nudge.
Yeah, or maybe David Hall can confirm it.
Okay, I'm on it.
All right, thank you. Okay. Sorry, we're kind of multitasking. We're trying to finish up H315, among other things. So our next section of the budget is with the Lieutenant Governor's office. And so we have the Lieutenant Governor here, and we have her entire staff also here. So thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And if you want to go through your budget, it's not too complicated, which is always good. But what the budget request is for the office for this coming fiscal year, and then we can open it up for any questions. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's wonderful to come before you virtually today. And I just want to start by saying that I am in the building, that we continue to have hot coffee, and that my virtual door is open, and we can't wait to have you back. Before I briefly go through our lean but very effective budget, I'd like to introduce Hazel Brewster, who's my Chief of Staff, hailing from Morrisville, Vermont. Also, Holly Anderson, who you may know from the Agency of Administration. Holly serves as the Chief Financial Officer and is responsible for overseeing the office's budget. And then also Brenda Berry, who serves as the Deputy Chief Financial Officer. So about the Lieutenant Governor's budget, the budget of our office, as you may know, as the office falls into the executive branch, the budget is maintained and largely requested by the governor. But I'd like to highlight some of the priorities for the office and then just walk you through what the budget entails. So first, in terms of priorities, number one, doing my job, presiding over the Senate Tuesday through Friday, working to make sure we get quick responses to the hundreds and hundreds of Vermonters who have reached out over the last 90 days with all sorts of concerns related to unemployment insurance, to vaccines. We've received over 500 constituent requests via our website, via emails and phones, and also making sure that there's regular and ongoing good dialogue with the governor's office around the pandemic. I regularly attend the SEOC briefings and meet with him. In the limited space that we have to keep a platform to advance any policy areas or initiatives, I've launched two initiatives. The first is called Seat at the Table, which is a bi-weekly virtual roundtable to bring the voices of Vermonters into Montpelier on any sort of issue. We've focused on broadband, on health equity, specifically related to some of our former refugees in the state, the economic well-being of women, workforce development, and the next one will focus on our tax increment financing and downtown redevelopment. Separately, Lieutenant Governor for a Day, which is an effort by the office to try to increase civic engagement, political participation, especially with our next generation. So from third and fourth grade all the way up to high school, we've had classrooms kind of come into the building virtually and then watch the presiding that happens and the work of the Senate. I think most of all, day in and day out through our activities, focus on transparency, a focus on integrity, and really trying to keep the public trust in government. So against that backdrop, I'd like to talk about our lean but effective budget. You should have the fiscal year 2022 budget request. And beginning on page 4, you'll see that the Lieutenant Governor's office represents less than 1/4% of the governor's overall budget. So that's about 0.23%. This is great. I'll give a moment for, if you go to one more page. Sorry, I think what you have, keep going. There you go. Yes, so you'll see that the Lieutenant Governor's office represents 0.23% of 100% of the governor's budget, so less than 1%. The proposed budget for this year is roughly $239,000. And this is about a $32K reduction in total, which you can see on the next page.
Probably driven by health insurance.
Exactly. Yep. So that's the only discrepancy between this budget and the prior budget. I do not have dependents. My chief of staff does not have dependents. So there was a reduction.
Mm-hmm.
I think any lieutenant governor will tell you that one staff person for an office that sometimes feels like it's the next place Vermonters go and they can't reach the governor. It's a lot of work. We're doing our very best to make sure we get responses to constituents, especially around this pandemic. I don't think we'd say no if there was an opportunity to keep that decrease in funding and be able to use it for a temporary staff. But I've requested that of the governor and mentioned it to the House. I'm not going to bring it up today because I believe that given the current funding situation for the state, that we will do the best that we can and will continue to do the best that we can with the funds that we have. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about our lean but very effective budget.
I think it's pretty straightforward. Did I see a hand up? Senator Baruth.
Thanks.
I hope you haven't been texted with a question to ask like you did yesterday, Senator Baruth.
I don't believe anybody ever proved that. I think there was a suspicion that was unfounded, but let me turn.
Cynical one that I am. All right.
Would it be possible for you to bring on a temporary person for that amount, 32?
I think it's in total, maybe 24,000. I think it was 32 before some of the adjustments that have happened over the last year, and then ultimately 24. Mm-hmm. We had just asked for the flexibility to be able to do so in light of the pandemic, and what we see as sort of an uptick in, we believe it's an uptick, but hard to know with all the requests that are coming in. And it would be someone to come in 1 or 2 days per week to be able to do that. But I really feel that given, I don't want to ask for something given at a time when everyone's really struggling, and I know that budgets are really tight.
I think we all are feeling the same workload in terms of constituent communications, et cetera. So we can appreciate the diversity and the volume of requests that flow to you on a daily basis, and people are trying to get help and trying to get resolution, and they're using every avenue possible. So certainly know that you're entering the office at a time where there's just an awful lot of issues and serious concerns converging at one time. So you had more questions, Senator Baruth, or shall I move to Senator Starr?
I was just going to say that I had several times spoken with the previous lieutenant governor about trying to do something similar that would have represented an increase in the budget, and it was tough for that reason. But this seems like a good opportunity. If it's not technically an increase in the budget, don't
worry,
savings.
that general fund has already been assumed in the building of the budget to get to the bottom line. So
Understood,
we'd have to find the additional money.
If it's a temporary person, it could be one-time money.
Well, that's true if we're talking about temporary, or the other option I know, which has been used before, and that is interns, for example. College intern are particularly interested as well. So we can have more discussion. Or is this your section of the budget, Senator
is.
Bruce? Okay,
Would it be all right if I worked a little offline with Lieutenant Governor's office on that?
sure. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Senator Starr?
Yeah, well, I would consider this, but I think this is the same person that's asking for this every day, shuts off our wonderful discussions that we have on the Senate floor and disrupts that to no end.
Important Senate work.
I know, at least therapeutic.
Thanks, Lieutenant Governor, for being with us.
Any other questions or comments? It's pretty straightforward from a budgetary perspective. Okay, I'm just looking at my screen. Okay, Becca had to step off. She had another call to take. On the last witness on a Friday afternoon, Lieutenant Governor, it actually is it's not a bad place to be because probably for some people, it's depending on what you're asking for or what you're presenting can be somewhat more contentious or controversial. So I think everybody's probably pretty mellow by Friday afternoon and appreciate your coming and being the end of our scheduled testimony for the committee for the week.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I have a long ride to Bennington.
Senator Sears, I've been
So I always
accommodating.
leave early on Friday afternoon.
I know, and I've accommodated your special circumstances for the last decade, and I would like to put
You
that
have.
on record.
You have, and I appreciate your allowing me to get out on those cold, snowy days in the wintertime by 2:30 at the latest on Friday afternoon.
And this happens to be Good Friday.
I also wanted to let the Lieutenant Governor know I've refrained from voting no on the adjournment motions for the weekend, but normally I do if I'm in Montpelier. So it was hard to argue that I couldn't get to my living room or dining room by 9:30 on Monday morning. So I stopped voting no on those. But when we return live, I plan to vote no again.
Oh, I'm surprised you haven't come up with some reason.
Well, I wanted to know why I have to get out of here by 2:30 today. I have that long drive.
Yeah, because you have a long drive.
I was listening for it today, Senator.
So I think then, unless there are further questions, we will let the Lieutenant Governor and her staff go back to answering emails and constituent matters. And we are going to adjourn the committee